Hosea chapter 4, verses 1 through 3, accused the people of being unfaithful and announced punishment on them. There's a sudden change which takes place at verse 4. Hosea basically said that the people are not primarily responsible for this situation. Yet let no one find fault, and let none offer reproof. Welcome to Presentation, Ponder, Practice. The evidence that people had was not against one another, it was against the priest. The evidence was the people themselves. The priesthood as a whole are charged with misconduct and a failure to perform their duty. So you will stumble by day, and the prophet also will stumble with you by night, and I will destroy your mother. Hosea 4 verse 5. Unfaithful religious leaders would stumble basically all the time. Their prophecies would be false. As punishment, the institutional Israel, described as the mother, would be destroyed by God. The people themselves were destroyed because of lack of knowledge. Failure to teach the people rightly is a grievous offense. Matthew chapter 18 verse 6 and James chapter 3 verse 1 as just two examples. Priests were to teach the law to the people. The lack of knowledge was due to the priest rejecting knowledge. Therefore, God would reject them from being his priest. Since they had forgotten the law of God, he would forget their children. The children, misled by false teaching, would also suffer with their false teachers. Growth in number is often considered as a sign of spiritual maturity and or growth. Hosea countered this, saying the more they multiplied, the more they sinned against God. The more religious leaders Israel had, the more sin increased. God said, I will change their glory into shame. Verse 7. One day, God would cause the people to see the religious leaders as the frauds they were and cause the people to despise them. The sacrificial system was so corrupted by the leaders and the people that the priests were misusing the sacrifices brought by the people because of their sin, and the people were so permissive, which led the priests to manipulate the sins versus sacrifices. In essence, the priest fed from the sacrificial system as directed from Leviticus chapter 6 verses 25 and 26. It was therefore in their favor to allow the people to sin more and more, condemn the people for their sins, thus increasing their source of food. Misguided people then resulted because of the misleading officials. Punishment would be just and appropriate. The religious leaders were at fault for their false teaching by word and example. God would punish them for their ways and their deeds, causing the leaders to suffer what they had put upon the people, according to verse 9. The people came to believe that if you performed sacred rites, the result was automatic increase of fertility for their wives and livestock and a life of plenty. Their hope, though, would fail, for they would eat but not have enough. They would play the harlot, but not increase, because they had stopped giving heed to the Lord. They had forsaken giving heed to God. Verse 10. Israel was apostate. The leaders failed to give true teaching, indulged in greed, and promoted sin. The people who followed their lead were also guilty. The people increased in sin by the allowance of the priest. Israel as a whole would not receive benefit for her infidelity. A proverb then follows in verse 11. It reads, harlotry or prostitution, wine and new wine take away the heart. This proverb is a transition piece, closing out the thoughts of this study and looking forward to the prophet's mourning for the state of the people in the next section. Debauchery ruins the soul and clouds the mind. And that's exactly what was happening in Israel. Their souls were ruined and their minds were clouded. Religious leaders, therefore, must be aware of how they lead the people and where they are leading them to by their words, their example, and their allowance. The people must be responsible for their own actions, though. Leaders who do evil cannot be followed. Permissiveness, even by leadership, is not a license to get away with sin. As verse 11 suggests, sin is simply a matter of the heart, and Israel's heart was not right with God. May God bless you with a good, strong, faithful heart that seeks to always do God's will.